Welcome to this edition of What's the Score? Let me remind you, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please click the like button wherever you listen to this program. And if you'd like to support this and future programs, I encourage you to become a patron via patreon.com. There'll be details to follow in the middle of the program. We couldn't do the program without our patrons, so thank you. And enjoy today's wonderful podcast. Today's program made possible by patrons like you. Welcome to where we celebrate music from the movies. From the golden age to present day, we've got it all covered. We talk to those in the entertainment industry and find out about their favorite scores. You found the podcast, What's the Score? I'm your host, Frank R. Wilson. So sit back, relax, grab a popcorn, and let's see what we'll be hearing today. Recognize that music? It's a favorite of our guest today. Now, our guest isn't connected to the film industry per se, but that doesn't disqualify her in any way. She's a concertmaster with the Wichita Symphony Orchestra and a master violinist. Now, our paths crossed when she became the featured soloist of a concerto by film composer George Clinton, who was a past guest of the program. In fact, our first guest, actually. Her knowledge of music is unquestioned, and I think you'll enjoy getting to know her. It would take too long to share her many accolades, so we'll just kind of dive on in and learn about her as we go along. So I hope all of you will please join me in welcoming Holly Mulcahy to the program. Hi, Holly.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure, and I'm just delighted. I'm really excited about talking with you and learning more about you and also sharing some of your cues. That I just love some of your selections. So we'll just kind of dive on in.
Okay.
As most of my guests know, and listeners, I always like to learn more about the person who we're going to be talking about today. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of sharing with us a little bit about, your background, where'd you grow up, and family and hobbies and things of that nature, and, just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I grew up in Denver, Colorado, and for a musician, having two parents who weren't musicians was kind of unusual, but I think it was kind of a blessing in disguise, meaning that they were able to offer me a really great worldview and life perspective. My mom was a dental assistant and my dad worked with United Airlines, and both of them they're very, very curious people, started working with the Denver Zoo and became docents there, and eventually started traveling around the country and living on wildlife refuges. So they lead a very wild and cool life. And for me as a musician, looking at them and how they observe the world has given me the kind of grounding that I don't think many people get, and I feel very lucky that they have installed curiosity into me.
Yeah, that's interesting, because most of our guests usually had one member of the family that was very seriously into music. And yet, I mean, I know there's a little bit of music in your family background from what you and I have talked about, but I'm kind of curious, what drew you to that? Because I know you were, up until a point, you were kind of like an ordinary kid growing up in Colorado and doing hiking and fishing and, doing all kinds of outdoor stuff and that sort of thing. So what drew you to music?
Well, I have always loved music, and it was a very big part of my life, just from simple going to Saturday movies with my dad or watching movies at home, and listening to the music was a very big part of it. My dad always made it clear that certain music makes you feel this way or feel that way. There's a surprise coming because you can hear it in the music. So it was his. I don't think he was even guiding me. He was just having fun, sharing what he loved. It was his way of listening that kind of helped me learn to listen more than any other music teacher early on in my life. I think it was my parents who helped me learn to listen. And so it was when I was in a general music class and I heard Scheherazade for the first time, and the way that each section of Scheherazade had a character associated with it. The violin solo represents a princess who was very powerful and very smart and savvy, and that just spoke to me, and that's what kind of steered me into playing the violin, is that narrative power. But it was the deep listening that I think I was already attuned to doing.
Now, as a young person, I'm kind of guessing playing the violin wasn't exactly the coolest thing to do.
No, it definitely was not the coolest thing to do.
I mean, playing electric guitar maybe, or drums, but violin?
Yeah. All the cool kids in my school, all the cool girls played the flute.
Oh, okay.
Was the instrument. I just really wanted to play the flute just to fit in, but I'm so glad I didn't. So glad.
Do you play other instruments out of curiosity?
Oh, not really. No.
Yeah.
Not at all. I started with piano, but that I don't enjoy playing it. And my brother's a trombonist, and of course I tried playing it just to see, how hard it is. And, it's fun. But I appreciate other instruments, I think, more than the ability to actually play them.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. The way that you and I became connected was, as I mentioned in the intro, through our first guest on the program, actually, was composer George Clinton. And he had written a concerto called The Rose of Sonora, and there's no way I'm going to be able to describe what kind of went on with that and how that came about. So I'm kind of curious if you wouldn't mind sharing with our listeners what the genesis of that concerto was and how you got connected with it, and so on and so forth.
Sure. Well, to give background, I love Westerns, the music from the Westerns, not necessarily the movies. I love the music. And every summer I play in the Grand Teton Music Festival out in Wyoming. And when I would drive, it's about a 24-hour drive. You'd stop in North Platte, Nebraska, and fuel up and go the next day for another 12 hours. And it was the mixtape kind of CD my husband had put together for me of basically 20 hours of the best Westerns musics.
Oh, wow.
All the Westerns you can think of. I had the soundtracks on about 20 hours of music. And that was my, the final trek through the plains and the kind of the Badlands and into the mountains, and just the grand vista of going west. With those soundtracks, it really put me in a mood. I just love the way they made me feel. And spending about 5 or 6 weeks out there, each summer I usually let my guard down. And one particular summer I really let my guard down and put on Facebook that if there was a Western-style violin concerto, I would be all over it. And after I hit send, put it on Facebook, I thought, there goes my career. No, nobody's going to take me seriously. I should be, like every
You're a
other
serious musician, for God's sake.
Well, now I'm not. And I should be like every other, what I consider normal musician, and like Schubert and Mozart. But I really preferred Morricone over Mozart. And I thought, well, there goes my career. And within seconds, people from around the world, just famous musicians and respected conductors, said, that's a really great idea. And I'm like, yeah, of course it's a great idea. And I know people. So I contacted George and asked him. I didn't think he would say yes, but I thought, I have to ask. And he said yes. And not only did he give me the soundscape of a genuine Western, he added another component, which was a story, a narrative. So it's very much like a movie, but for your mind. And it was that narrative of a female outlaw that kind of carries the whole story, which is, to me, it's like a modern-day Scheherazade.
Oh, wow. I love it. I mean, I'm reminded of my favorite composer, John Barry, had written he had a concept CD called Eternal Echoes, and people said, well, this, you usually write for films. Is this a film score? He said, of course it's a film score. I just don't have any film. And that's what this kind of sounds like. He just kind of created his own film in his own mind, and that's a great description of it, far better than I could do. Well, I'm delighted that George has allowed us to play a short clip of this. You're performing this around the country, various symphony orchestras on occasion. By the way, I would like for you and George to come to Louisiana. Just saying. Well, at the end, we'll talk about how they can keep track of where it's being performed and those sorts of things. But we are going to play a short clip from the fifth movement, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it. Tell us a little bit about what we can expect to hear in this particular piece of music that we're going to share.
Yeah, this is the concerto is in 5 scenes. George calls them scenes instead of movements because they are very, visually oriented. People can imagine whatever they want. And the general story arc is the first scene. Rose rides into town and breaks her lover out of jail, and then together they ride off to a secret mountain hideaway, and they of course have the ill-gotten gold in the saddlebags. And then the third movement, or the third scene, the old gang hunts them down and kills Jed, Rose's lover, and wounds Rose, leaving her for dead. And the fourth scene is the most sad and gorgeous scene of the whole concerto, and that's, Jed is dead, and Rose buries him. And the fifth scene, which you're about to hear, is the moment when Rose saddles her horse and loads her guns and outrides and outshoots all of the old gang and gets the gold back, which they stole when they came and killed Jed. And then at the end of that, she rides off into the red Sonoran sunset, just like every epic Western. It ends with the good guy, or the good gal in this case, riding off with the.
And I must tell you, when you listen to this, you can see everything that Ollie just described. You actually can. You not only see it, but feel it. So let's listen for ourselves. This is again from the concerto called Rose of Sonora. It's written by composer George Clinton. Sit back and enjoy. One of the things I mentioned in the introduction of you and reading up about you a little bit, and this is again because of my ignorance, so that's why I'm going to ask the question. What does a concertmaster do? What is a concertmaster?
Oh, it's the first chair violin, and if you think about it like a quarterback, you look at the conductor like the coach or the head of an organization. The concertmaster is the second face the audience sees after the conductor. And some of the logistical things that concertmasters do are convey the intentions of the conductor to the orchestra, and vice versa. You know, if there's something that needs to be said to the conductor to cover everybody in the orchestra's wishes, that is usually generally how it goes. Also, the concertmaster is a liaison to the audience, along with the conductor. And for me, I find great importance with the chair, meaning that it's like it's a platform, really, and it's a place that I can speak to audiences, to build bridges, and that's where my position in Wichita is extremely unique. Is I'm also the partner for audience engagement, and so it's not just I'm putting bowings in the parts for string players, which means you go up bow or down bow to make sure everybody's in the same part of the bow, but I'm also building connections and making the music relevant, approachable, and real to the audience so that they actually feel like they matter. And I think Wichita Symphony is one of the only orchestras in the country that has created a position like this, and it's allowed me to really build the ties and to see how some kind of position like this can bring in more audiences, younger audiences, newer audiences, people you don't expect to come into the hall, feel welcome, and I take great joy and great pride in building those bridges because of that.
I bet you do. Now, and again, I'm going to show my inexperience. I've been to a couple of events with symphony orchestras. If I recall correctly, first chair violin, you come out separately from the rest of the orchestra, right? And take a bow, if you will, and get applause and stuff, right?
Oh yeah, I mean it's a formality.
Right.
Basically, it's just to kind of let the audience know here's the start of the concert, and it's one last chance for the orchestra to tune.
Right, because you play, I don't know, middle C or whatever it's called, and everybody tries to duplicate it, correct?
Yeah, well, I basically look at the oboe player, and they play an A, and then basically I'll dictate when people tune. It's more of a formality anymore. This is a secret for your audience. Most orchestras tune backstage, so it's just
okay.
It's
your
just
secret's safe with us. Don't worry about it.
Well, I like breaking down all the barriers and giving people the little behind the scenes kind of things.
Well, I love it though. No, I bet, but I mean, you take a great deal of pride in that, I would think.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's just the thing that's so great about the Wichita Symphony is it allows me to do other things like the Rose of Sonora and the blog and a couple other things in my life, and the balance is what I find really rewarding. Yeah.
Well, you've mentioned your love of Western music, which we're going to be featuring in a couple of different cues today of that. The next one of which is from Django Unchained. You've mentioned the maestro Morricone.
Yes. And
this cue is called Brain Mule. Tell us a little bit about why you wanted to choose that amongst your favorites.
Well, to pick up Morricone, it's really hard. I love all of his Western music. I like this one because it's been used in a number of cues and a number of different covers, I guess, if you will. But in Django Unchained, it's the dentist truck, or not truck, but the dentist wagon is coming into town, and it's just the way there's this gigantic comical tooth on top of this wagon that's kind of announcing the dentist, and it's just, I don't know, it's just the way that it's just kind of bouncy. I don't think Morricone intended it for that kind of a cue. I'm sure it was a different Western, very, very different than Django Unchained, but I just like the vibe that it sets up, and this was one of the many Morricones on my mixtape, if you will, when I would drive out west.
No, I understand. No, it's terrific. I think our audience will enjoy it. Well, let's listen to this cue. This is from Django Unchained. The cue is called Brain Mule, and it's written by the maestro Ennio Morricone. You've kind of alluded to this, but it's maybe you can expand on it a little bit. You talked about the influence your dad had on when you would watch movies to kind of listen to the music. What is it that maybe you can expand on it a little bit more about? What is it that interests you about film music?
I think how, for me, learning film, about film music at such a young age, it filled in a lot of blanks for me as far as shortcuts, basically, of verbs and adjectives and emotions, where you instantly knew something was going to go down, or you instantly knew something was supposed to be funny without having a big draw up. It's just a big shortcut. And the way that film music manipulates you, I think, is just an absolute superpower. And that just haunted me and captivated me as a young kid. My first movie that I can remember was my dad took me to see Moonraker. I think we watched it at home. It's not, and I'm looking back because we just watched that movie the other night, my husband and I, and I can't believe my dad took me to see this.
How old were you?
I think I don't know if we went to the theater, but I was 6, and I think the movie had been out for a while. It must have been one of our Saturday mornings or Saturday afternoon movies that was just on at home. But watching it again, I was like, dang, this is really racy. I mean,
for a 6-year-old it is, yeah. It's
a terrible movie, but the music is so good, and just the way that soaring theme happens, and the way that the emotions get placed exactly where they should be. Without that music, that it just would have been nothing. So that kind of informed how I listen to everything else.
And we're going to play something from that film in a little bit. But it also brings to mind, have you ever had the privilege to watch a rough cut of a movie with no music?
Oh, that's brutal. Absolutely brutal.
Isn't it?
It's uncomfortable. Yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing how much it adds and or how much it subtracts, if another way of looking at it. It just a lot of things just fall flat. It's just it's quite amazing. Now, I'm kind of curious. I was going to save this for later, but I'll ask it now. As a musician, how do you feel about, because there's a lot of film scores right now, a lot of them, and I'm sure it's probably for budget reasons, that are, you probably know where I'm going with this, that will use computer generated instrumentation, or for lack of a better way of saying it, and to be fair, it actually sounds pretty good.
It sounds good.
Not great,
yeah.
But it sounds pretty good. What are your thoughts on that? And as a musician, does that concern you?
Well, always it concerns me. And I was just having this conversation with our music director last week in Wichita, actually, about when you hear music that's like authentic and made by real people, and it's just slightly out of tune. It's like, thank goodness it's a human playing. And for you and your listeners, you go to any like Morricone original recording, and the trumpet players are never in tune, but that's part of the color. And when you've got a clean, in tune, everything is just pitched perfectly, made by computers. It's good. It's just there's some texture lacking, some kind of color that's lacking, and I can't quite put my finger on it. Of course, I always want and advocate for using people, but yeah, I understand budgets. I just hope that there's some way to work through that and use more people.
Yeah, I'm trying to envision people showing up at a concert hall. It could be for any, film music, classical, whatever. And on the stage is just like one big computer.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, this is going to be great. I mean, so hopefully it never comes to that. My goodness.
I hope not.
Yeah,
I think one of the cool things when you go to a live concert is seeing the people working and sweating and emoting and feeling it. And then sometimes you can catch like a cellist looking across the orchestra to a violinist and a smile or a knowing look. You can't get that with a computer.
I think some of the best experiences I've had watching a symphony orchestra is watching them perform to picture or to a film. I mean, that's become a popular concept in the last few years.
Yeah.
Where I don't know if you, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
I've done those.
The end thing is John Williams stuff. I wish they'd branch out into some other people, but like E.T. I think was it E.T. or I can't remember what it was, but it was one of those I saw where they play the movie. And you can see on the screen when the orchestra and the conductor is being cued to get ready, and then they start playing. And you're exactly right. The power of watching them perform it, and also seeing the pictures on the screen is just, it's amazing.
I think having one of those live concerts to movie screen concert things it absolutely gives the audience a bigger picture. Well, picture is not the right word, but just a bigger impact feel of the entire movie. I mean, it's one thing to sit in a theater, a movie theater, and listen to the the soundtrack as the movie goes on, but to actually feel the impact of a live orchestra playing, those great soundtrack scores, that's something that's just completely unique.
Yeah. Let's listen to another cue that you had chosen, which is a little different than some of the others. This is from the film Matrix. It's the main theme from it, written by Don Davis, and I guess some other people contributed to it. Tell us a little bit about why you wanted to share that with our listeners today.
Yeah, when I saw the movie in the theater, the first thing I did when the movie was wrapping up in the credits is like, I've got to find out who this composer is. It sounded it was like no other score I'd ever heard. It was just so uniquely appropriate for the material in the film. So from the movie theater, on my way home, I stopped and bought the soundtrack, bought the CD. I was like, this is amazing. And I even remember calling my brother, who's a musician in the National Symphony, he's the principal trombone, and was like, have you heard this music? It is so cool. I mean, it's like Stravinsky on crack or something. It just was so mesmerizing and terrifying and evocative all at the same time. And just the way the Don Davis used the dynamics of bringing in certain sections of the orchestra and then eclipsing with another section of the orchestra was just genius. And it just kind of reiterated the feel of that movie, which was dark and edgy and scary and super uncomfortable. And I thought, what a perfect score. So that's why I chose this.
Excellent description. Well, let's have a listen for ourselves. This again is the main theme from the film called Matrix, and it's written by composer Don Davis. you'd be the perfect person to ask, and I'd be curious about your opinion on this. What's the status of classical music today?
That is about a 5-day, 24-hour each day kind of answer.
I know it's a big question, but
yeah, and the status is it's two-part. There's the perceived part of it's stuffy and it's exclusionary and unapproachable, and then there's the reality that classical music is something that we all are familiar with. We don't have to know who Mozart is or have heard of him, but we pretty much know his music as a society.
Yeah.
And it's just, our phone rings, our Beethoven Symphony 5, our car commercials to express luxury. They pick a Mozart symphony or a Brahms piano concerto, and it's just very much woven into our society, but we don't talk about it in that way.
And yet, would you say that the modern day version of classical music is film music?
Absolutely, 100%. And I like to kind of say that basically Hollywood is our modern day Vienna, where the operas back in the heyday of Vienna and even in Italy, that people would get excited about the overtures, and that was their pop music. And in the same way that we listen to film music today in our society, in America especially, that is very much part of our culture. But there's a snobbery about film music is pop's music. No, it's really not. It's just the same DNA as an overture for an opera. It's just expressing a feeling about a story. We just really need to embrace that more in this country.
Are you concerned? Because well, I don't want to prejudice your answer. Film music, a lot of it coming out today, I'm not talking about the past 20, 30, even 40, 50 years, but it seems to me a lot of the film music today is kind of moving away from more of that so-called classical sound, quote unquote. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think and to bring up what we just spoke about a little bit earlier, if budget. I think that has to play a lot in it. If you don't have the budget for a full-size orchestra and all the bells and whistles, you're going to be, less open, I think. Also, I get the impression that a lot of minimalist kind of approaches are trending. I don't think. I don't know. I hope that it. Melody prevails. As far as in film music, I mean, I think there's still a lot of really great film soundtracks coming out, but nothing like in the 60s and the 70s, the 50s, the 40s, that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, and I guess what it strikes me, I'm not even talking about computers trying to duplicate the sound of an orchestra. I'm talking about
right.
The electronic sounds that are starting to be used. And I realize, innovation and trying to do something different, come up with unique sounds. I can appreciate that, but it seems to be losing. Again, I'm not a musician. It's hard for me to express it, but it seems to be losing that classic sound that I love so much. Maybe it's just because I'm an old fart. I don't know.
I don't know. I'm going to take a different avenue on this too. If you look at Star Trek Lower Decks, which is an animated, fantastic series. It might be on Paramount. I can't remember exactly, but it is legit Star Trek. I cannot remember the composer's name, but that is some of the best film sounding music, and that's streamable series, and so that soundscape is there. And I don't know if that composer is using a full orchestra of people or if it's just replicated symphonic sounds, but definitely check out Star Trek Lower Decks. That soundtrack is just fierce.
Oh, good, good. That's good to hear. That's encouraging to hear. That's great. The
I think you're going to geek out over it.
Yeah. The next cue we chose, or that you chose, is going to be a little bit different. And I mean that in the most positive way, because a lot of times people don't choose a song, but you did.
Yeah.
And it happens to be one of my favorites, and my listeners will know why. We're talking about the theme song from the James Bond film called Thunderball, written by Tom Jones. Tell us a little bit about, because you've chosen these kind of, more classical orchestral pieces, and then you choose this bombastic title song. Tell us a little bit about why you wanted to choose that amongst your favorites.
Well, first of all, I'm a huge James Bond film fan, and I love all the music, and it was absolute torture to pick one for your show, or even two or three. It's impossible. I could probably go on about the other films and why they're awesome as well, but this one also, it has a very nostalgic feel. This is another one that I remember watching with my dad on, a snowy Colorado evening at home. Another very inappropriate. I'm like, I can't believe we watched it.
Yeah, there's probably more inappropriate in that one than there was in Moonraker.
It was cringy, absolutely cringy.
That's why I love it.
No, it's a guilty pleasure. But the music, I think, is cringeable, or if that's even a word, as cringy as some of the actors, Sean Connery's, actions are in that movie. The music will stand the test of time. The acting and the toxic masculinity will not stand the test of time. But I love how brash and bold and ballsy that opening is. It's just, it knocks you out. It lets you know this is going to be a very serious movie, and it's just delicious. The richness and the way that music, that first chord, just hits you. And I think this may have been, I could be wrong, one of the first Bond films where it was a male singer singing.
Yeah.
And that also struck me. So between that, it just was just the fat brass sounds. It was just luxurious to me, to my ears, and I don't know, I love it.
Yeah, no, I do too, and I'll bore some of my listeners with this, and I don't know if you're familiar with this at all concerning this theme. One, it was interesting that some of the critics, because it followed the movie Goldfinger, some of the people called this song Thunderfinger, thinking that it was trying to go off of that. But what's even actually more interesting, I don't know if you were aware of this, Barry had actually written a different theme song for the movie called Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Oh, yeah, sung by Shirley Bassey and by Dionne Warwick.
Very good. You get bonus points for knowing that. And if you listen to the score, that melody from that song is featured throughout the movie, more so than the theme from Thunderball. And it was only at the last minute they decided to, have a different tune and whatnot. But still, I thought like you, I thought it was a knockout and it was terrific. So let's let the music do the talking for itself. This is the main title from the film Thunderball. It's the song written by John Barry and Don Black, and it's sung by Tom Jones.
He always runs while others walk. He acts while other men just talk. He looks at this world and wants it all. So he strikes like thunderbolt. Success. His needs are more, so he gives less. They call him the winner who takes all, and he strikes like thunder. Any woman he wants, he'll get. fight goes on and on and on. But he thinks that the fight is worth it all. So he strikes like thunder.
We'll get back to our program in a minute. This program is done for the love of film and film music, plain and simple. However, it does take a huge investment in time and in fees for me to make the program work for you. I don't sell commercial time and don't really want to on this program. Rather, I'm kind of like a public broadcasting station. I need support from listeners like you. For as little as $3 a month, you can help me offset the time spent in putting the program together. Or maybe you just think of it as leaving a tip in the tip jar. Either way, if you can join up, there will be bonuses, like an additional 10 to 15 minute segment with our guest every week. Well, we'll play additional cues as well as ask some extra questions. And it's going to be only available to patrons. How do you sign up? Well, it's simple. You go to patreon.com/whatsthescore, and that's all one word. That's Patreon, that's patreon.com/whatsthescore. Check it out. We'd be grateful for your support. That's patreon.com. One of the things I noticed in your bio, and again, I don't have a real appreciation of this, so perhaps you can help me understand it a little bit more. What is it about your violin that makes it special? Because apparently it's a very special violin.
Yeah, it's just turned 100 years old a few years ago.
Wow.
It's which is kind of a baby in the grand scheme of things. I mean, if you look at a Strad, they're near 300 years old, getting close to 300 years old. But my violin was owned by the world-renowned violinist Eugene Fodor, who was the first American to win the International Tchaikovsky competition. I think he won the Paganini competition as well. And that was it was so huge when he won Tchaikovsky, having an American win a Russian competition. It really set a tone. I studied with the same teacher as Eugene about 30 years after him. And we both grew up in Colorado. So to me, Eugene was kind of like, well, if this country kid can make it out of Colorado to being a classical musician, I can. So I kind of looked up to him, and one day I was getting my bow rehaired at this violin shop, and Eugene was there, and he was dropping off a violin to be sold, and so I picked it up, tried it, and I never gave it back. And I like it. It's a Cavani built in Modena, Italy, where balsamic vinegar and Ferraris are manufactured.
Oh, wow.
And it's got a real honest sound. It doesn't have one of those sweet throaty sounds like a Stradivarius, but it's got a real honest sound. It can growl if I need it to, and it can sing if I need it to. And I've been enjoying playing it for a while now.
How closely do you guard that? I mean, I can't imagine having something that special and being scared every single moment. If you go on an airplane or in a car or whatever. I mean, is it kind of a little bit intimidating to say I got to take care of this?
Well, it's a pain to carry on an airplane because I get on board early and I put it in the bin above, and then people want to shove things around. They don't realize it's a fragile instrument. I'm sure it's in a case, but still knocking it around is not something
Not
I
a good
enjoy.
thing. Yeah.
No, so it's never a real joy to travel, but that's all I do is traveling with it.
So I'm sure you have a specially built case, or at least something that's you can feel pretty confident about.
It's pretty decent. It's not infallible. I mean, I certainly don't want to drop it by any means.
Boy, no kidding. I mean, I can't even imagine having something that special and wanting to take care of it. That's a neat story. Neat story. You the next cue we were going to play it's one of my favorite scores. I could easily put this in my top 20, maybe even my top 10. I don't know. And a lot of my listeners will be surprised when I say this, because it's kind of quirky and weird, but boy, does it work for the movie, and it's very listenable on CD. The film I'm talking about is Wild Things, and it's written by, who we've talked about here just before, composer George Clinton. This is going to be the end title sequence. Tell me a little bit about why you wanted to choose that to share with our audience today.
Yeah, this, much like Matrix, when I heard Wild Things, I had to buy the CD.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Yep, I'm the same way.
Guilty pleasure. When you listen to it, you just get the feeling of the movie. You don't even have to know what the movie's about, but you instantly, understand when you listen to the various cues in this thing. It's dirty, it's sultry, it's dangerous, it's mysterious, it's wrong, it's creepy, and it's so perfect for this movie. And if your listeners, they probably know, but if they don't know it, it starts off in this kind of a swampy kind of Everglades scene, and you get this sultry, rich, warm, humid feel.
Yeah.
In the thing, but the very opening of the vocal solo it sets the entire mood. It's like, where's this going to go? And that's the mood you have through the whole movie when you're watching it. Where's this going to go? It's a big question to me.
Yeah, I mean it's one of these. I mean, there's a lot of scores that fit this description, but what I do like about it is that not only does it work perfectly for the film, in my view, it's great as a standalone experience as well, and you can't say that for all film scores.
Absolutely. And the way that George uses the percussion and the bass, the sliding, and it just, everything is so delicious and so on point with getting an emotion and getting a feel. I mean, I almost feel like I should be smoking a cigarette when I watch this. And I don't smoke, but I mean, you just like instantly feel about 1,000% cooler than you really ought to be when you're listening to this music.
What a great description! I can't top that. Let's have a listen for ourselves. This is again from the film Wild Things, and it's written by composer George Clinton. Another thing I noticed in your bio was an interesting project that you're heavily involved in called Arts Capacity. Could you tell me a little bit about what that's all about?
Yeah, it's a nonprofit that I started down in Chattanooga when I was concertmaster with the Chattanooga Symphony. I decided, since I've got this platform of concertmaster, I should be out in the community doing things. And one of the things that I wanted to do on my spare time was to visit prison and bring in music. And what we've found is bringing in music, it's something that I do. It's just much my personality is I don't really want to play at people and say, here, take this, consume it. I want to hear how you feel about the music that I just played. And so what we started at the Walker State Prison down in Georgia, which is just across the state line, is a two-way conversation. As soon as I would play some music, I would ask immediately what the prisoners felt, and they shared some of the most insightful and deep and just really meaningful comments. And we've been going about 7 years now.
Wow.
The program has been slowly building. We now have a couple of prisons in Kansas, so we've got 3 prisons we actively take music into and collect data from of how the music is helping some pro-social behavior, some emotional intelligence, how people are able to connect with their families through music, and really give the prisoners a way to kind of capture their emotions and also to express themselves better with their families. It gives them, something to talk about with their families as well when they do talk. The other goal is to help with recidivism. And I know that sounds really kind of silly, but music does help like a tool. It helps you access and kind of use to kind of tame tempers and emotions, and having an outlet through music really allows for that. And so it's a skill to be learned. And when we go into prisons and offer music, we are very aware that these people will be our future neighbors. They will get out. And to have music as a tool to help emotions, when you're feeling down, you can use it to help bring you up, and other things. That's our primary goal. It's been a wonderful discovery.
Wow, I'm blown away by that. That's really interesting what you're doing, and it's obviously making an impact. Congratulations on that. You should be applauded for it. That's terrific.
Thank you.
Okay, we've mentioned this already once before, and of course my listeners will know I'm delighted to share this one as well. You mentioned that when you were a small child of 6, that you watched a film called Moonraker.
Yes.
And one of the cues that you wanted to share from that film is a favorite of mine, and it's a theme that was used several times throughout the series, written by John Barry. The original theme was just called simply 007, but in the film Moonraker, it's referred to as Boat Chase. Tell us a little bit about why you wanted to choose that particular cue.
Well, once again, it's really hard to pick any John Barry cues because they're all so good.
Yeah.
This was a big nostalgia one for me, just because it captured a lot of the essence of all the James Bond films, the best. This one just for me is typical Barry, where he captures some kind of a cheekiness, if you will, to the action scene. I don't know if this cue would work in a modern day action scene, but it sure works in the boat chase in Moonraker and the other similar spots. I think this was used in Thunderball as well, if I recall.
Well, yeah, it was originally used in For Much with Love. Then he reused it in Thunderball, and then he reused it in Diamonds Are Forever, and then finally Moonraker.
Crazy.
But it all took on a different flavor. It was very much. It was a lot brassier in its earlier versions, and of course this one in Moonraker is more symphonic, for lack of a better way of saying it.
And it's a little slower than the others. I don't know, I just like it.
Yeah, and yet I think it works in every film. It works just fine. So
I read somewhere where he was inspired by the Magnificent Seven, with the beats in the Magnificent Seven, that was used for this.
Could very well be the case. I've not read that, but I wouldn't doubt you on that. that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, let's have a listen for ourselves. This again is from the film called Moonraker. The cue is referred to as Boat Chase, and it's written by, in my opinion, the maestro John Barry. Here we are talking about film music, and other than Rose of Sonora, which there technically is not a film, have you had the honor or the privilege to actually play on a film score before?
I have never played on a film score, but I've played one of those live orchestras with the film behind it. I've done a few.
Okay.
You know, the American in Paris and I can't remember. There's some old ones that
they did an American in Paris, really, with a live orchestra. Wow.
Yeah, and then what else was there? Was The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, wow.
I've done a few. They're always a challenge. And of course the Bugs Bunny show with George Doherty, with all the cartoons. That is some of the hardest music ever to play, but man, is that fun.
Huh. Yeah, and what amazes me, and I'm sure you know about this, and maybe you can talk to it. And again, I'm not a musician, but that's why I'm so impressed by it. I've been told, by a lot of composers of film music that, all right, so we all show up at the studio, everybody gets a copy of the score and whatnot, and if you're lucky, you might get one rehearsal, and then boom, let's go. And I think to myself, how do you get 30, 40, 50, sometimes 90 or 100 people to play something with basically no practice at all? I mean, that impresses me. I mean, talk about that if you wouldn't mind.
Well, not having played on one of the sets for that, I can't really speak personally, but I do know that for film composers who are recording, it is a very specific time that you only get like one rehearsal and maybe a few times through. You're generally going to have some of the best. I would say the Hollywood orchestra players, the ones who do the soundtracks, are some of the best musicians in the world, and rightfully so. It's just some phenomenal players, but also the conductor or the composers many times will conduct. They will like George would read the cues. Here's what's happening in this scene. And if the players don't know what's happening in the scene, they will, just play what they see. But if there's an intention behind, this is a really sultry love scene, or this is a really terrifying, spooky scene, they will, it tells them a lot of how to play, which I think is important. It saves a lot of time.
Yeah. And here's another silly question from a non-musician. All right, when I'm watching an orchestra, it's like, okay, how important really is this conductor? I mean, I know he starts everybody on time, but other than that, he's just waving his hands and those sorts of things. I mean, and you guys are perhaps focused on the score, the sheet music in front of you. I mean, help me understand. I mean, do you actually occasionally look at the conductor and what is he communicating to you, or does that question make even sense? I don't know.
Oh, of course, yeah. A lot of people ask that. And it looks like musicians aren't looking at the conductor, but in reality, they're always in our peripheral vision. Sometimes there'll be direct eye contact that we will try to connect with the conductor for important cues, important downbeats. But they do, or they should, help shape the phrases and shape the intent. To me, a conductor should be something like an air traffic controller. You're just telling the planes where to fly, how high to fly, so they don't run into each other. The planes are the musicians, and the conductor is kind of guiding along by saying, play this louder, play this faster, winds, I need this quieter, strings bring up the sound here, play it more, off the string. So they're dictating and kind of like controlling 80 or 90 people on stage at one time. So it's a balancing act. Of course, there's the horror stories of egotistical conductors, which that happens. But it's a big balance of understanding the purpose and a mutual respect between the orchestra and the conductor, where you get the biggest successes.
Yeah, well, I just on my bucket list, somehow, if I can somehow make it work, just once, I want to stand up in front of an orchestra with a baton. Maybe just conduct the James Bond theme and another Barry composition or something. Just dying wish. I'm putting it out there in case anybody can make it happen.
Okay.
All right. The next cue, I love this one. Great movie, wonderful composer. I'm talking about the film Mask of Zorro, written by James Horner, and that was another one you wanted to play. Tell us a little bit about why you wanted to include that amongst your favorites.
Yeah, it feels like a guilty pleasure. This is another movie that I bought the soundtrack for because I just loved it so much. Just the way Horner shapes the whole feel of the movie with the lushness and the mood, and there's a sentimental and a familiarity and a tantalizing quality all mixed up together with how he kind of unfolds the opening line. He welcomes you in with this kind of like foot stomping Mexican traditional kind of dance. You can feel it in the music, and I just love the invitation to buy into that history, into that the storyline of Zorro, and it's just cool. It's just cool. I just love it.
I can't improve upon that. I agree with you. Let's have a listen for ourselves. Again, from the film Mask of Zorro, I believe it's in the main title, and it's written by composer James Horner. The list of cues that you've provided to us probably gives us a little bit of insight on this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Other than George Clinton, who are the composers that you really like and why?
I have to say, John Barry was my gateway drug to to film scores, and primarily because that's what I first listened to with James Bond, and then it was Morricone. Although when I was listening to these as a child, I didn't know who they were. But I wanted to be the next John Barry. I wanted to write movie music, and that was a style that I found just so compelling. Morricone's... Oh, sorry?
No, and forgive me, but here's something I find interesting that I read amongst film scoring aficionados on Facebook and whatnot. Sometimes Barry's gets criticized for being too simplistic and repetitive and all that sort of stuff, and which... I'm sorry, I don't get it. Where's that criticism come from? I mean, it's not real sophisticated music, is kind of what they say.
I think it's jealousy, and I also think. No, I'm serious.
I know you are. Yeah.
I think people feel exposed, and in music, in my field especially, and I'm dealing with a lot of contemporary classical composers, not film composers, but orchestral classical composers. There is such a stigma that if you don't write something really difficult, really strange, really out there, you're not going to be taken seriously. And if you write something beautiful and simple, you're a joke. That's basically in a nutshell, and it's very. I'm being very frank with you and your listeners.
Well, I'll be frank with you if you'll be frank with me. How's that?
Okay. So I think that when you have audiences factored in, what's the audience going to like should be one of the baselines. And when I'm working with composers who are in the classical field, not film composers, we'll talk about this loop of who are you writing for? And then I give an example of you're writing for an audience. I am your salesperson. Please write something I can feel good about selling. And if I feel good about selling it, they will buy it. And if they will buy it, they will want more from you. So it's kind of an agreement. And I think that's where Barry is he's a threat because it's so beautiful and it's so simple. It's hard to write simple, beautiful music, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you mentioned also Morricone that I'm a big fan of, and
oh yeah.
And anybody else on your radar that kind of really you enjoy?
Well, it's the weirdest thing. It's director Quentin Tarantino. He does a fantastic job of kind of sussing out these composers, like Django Unchained, the movie. It's not just Morricone. There's the Balakov, I think. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, and the guy that wrote Day of Anger. Those are like spaghetti westerns. I've never seen the movies, but I love the music. And when you start to find out who wrote this, who wrote Day of Anger, who wrote the real version of Django, you kind of go down rabbit holes to find out what else they made, what else they wrote, and it's fantastic. Those are my favorites.
Okay, yeah, well, that's a good list to say the least. No question about it. In fact, speaking of Morricone, the next cue we were going to play comes from the film Hateful Eight, which I think is one of the last films he did. It's certainly one of the last major films he did.
That's the last one he won. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
He won an Academy Award for that. I think it was the last film he wrote.
It might be, yeah. Tell us a little bit about why you wanted to choose that today.
Yeah, the movie was epic. It's kind of a Western in its own. But just the way it opens is just filled with like this sick fear, and you kind of get it. Something really horrible is going to go down, and that just feeling of anxiety and dread he captures so well with the contrabassoon. It's just so gravelly and deep, and just the melody is intoxicating. It just kind of sets the tone, and for me, it was a little bit different than his previous, way earlier film scores, and I just love the colors. And I love the movie, of course, but I'll listen to that. That's one of my most recent favorites that I'll listen to when I'm flying back and forth to places. It just kind of puts me in a mood.
Yeah. Well, let's have a listen for ourselves again from the film Hateful Eight, written by the maestro Ennio Morricone. So, Holly, how do people keep in touch with you or kind of know what you've got going on and what gigs you're playing and those sorts of things?
Well, probably the fastest way is on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. I'm easily found on all of those. I also have a website, hollymulcahy.com. And then rosasonora.com keeps track of where Rosa Sonora is being performed and with whom. We just finished up our final Rosa Sonora performance in North Carolina last month, and the next season will begin with the South Carolina Philharmonic, October 7th. And that website is constantly updating.
Okay. And I'm sure that the Louisiana performance will be upcoming shortly.
I hope so. I'll have to reach out. I'll reach out to that executive director and I'll say,
okay, yeah,
"Hey, Frank Wilson wants to come. You better schedule this."
Oh yeah, that'll really turn his mind around. Oh, Frank Wilson said it. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh, Holly, I can't tell you. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. You've been a terrific guest. Really had some insightful comments and some terrific music to choose from. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. What a blast.
Yeah, my pleasure. And continued success. I have no doubt that you will. And I hope that Rosa Sonora continues to have its continued success as well.
Well, thank you.
Well, with that, I want to thank not only our guest, Holly, but also all our listeners for tuning in today, and in particular our patrons who help support the program through patreon.com. Thank you very much for that support. Much appreciated. And I guess with that, there's only one thing left to say, and that's simply this. My name's Frank R. Wilson. My time's up. I thank you for yours. Thanks for listening to What's the Score?